If you want a utilitarian vehicle capable of taking you up a mountain, falling off of it, and then driving you back home, Toyota has two options for you. Today I'm going to explore both of them to help you and myself decide which one is better. Prior to the gloves coming off, if you enjoy fun, detailed car content without fluff, subscribe and hit the bell for notifications. It may seem small, but it's pivotal in helping the channel get more cars to review. Before some keyboard warriors come for everything I hold sacred, yes, these are not direct competitors, but I have seen and heard a lot of people cross-shopping these two, including myself a little bit, so that's who this video is for, and if you're just curious. To start things off, the Tacoma is going to be about $5,000 cheaper. If you equip it the same, you can make a Tacoma much cheaper, but those tacos are likely off the radar of those that are considering a 4Runner. This is going to start right around $43,000 with four-wheel drive. The 4Runner, though, feels more expensive and it comes with more features. So you will have LED projector headlamps as standard along with LED fog lights, whereas the Tacoma will have halogen projectors as standard and LED reflectors available. I love the look of the LED DRL, an option on the 2023 TRD Offroad, which is sitting next to me. This 4Runner is a 2023 TRD Pro, but I will be driving a TRD Offroad later to make this apples to apples. I'm also going to place a focus on double cab V6 Tacomas. No matter which one you go with, you will have underbody protection standard up front. The 4Runner takes one step further and gives standard protection for the transfer case and fuel tank. When navigating these fairly large vehicles, it's nice to have 360 view camera, and these both offer one, but the picture quality is rivaled by a first-grade art student. Either way you go, you'll have plenty of sidewall in most trims, but the 4Runner Limited and TRD Sport come with 20-inch wheels. A couple inches more than the most flashy Tacoma. And if you want this obnoxious green taco or any other Toyota, let me recommend Royal South Toyota in Bloomington, Indiana, the friendly, community-focused dealership that has let me test drive countless new and used cars over the years. Check them out and tell them thanks for me. When looking at a Tacoma SR5, both of these are still going to have proximity unlock and lock. Those trims also come with sliding rear windows, but the Tacoma's is more
coming soon to own.
And the 4Runners is... Now the Tacoma next to me is actually a double cab with the 6-foot bed, but even if you have the 5-foot standard bed, the 4Runner is going to have better off-road angles, so your approach departure is improved. Roughly the same ground clearance between these two at 9.5 inches. But since I've brought up that long bed, let's talk about practicality. So the Tacoma is going to come with a composite bed, and they also come with a bed rail system that, when you equip it with the bed cleats, makes for an extremely versatile vehicle. I actually owned a long bed second gen Tacoma, and even with the 6 feet of length there, I still had several times where I needed to drop the tailgate and use those tie down points, and it was very helpful. I would go with the long bed if you plan on using your vehicle for work, as it makes for less sketchy transportation of bulky items, but the versatile tie down points do make the short bed practical for people who only need to move big stuff occasionally. Though I should also say the 4Runner has a crazy amount of capacity. It's actually larger with the second row down than the new Sequoia, which is kind of a diss on the new Sequoia too, but seriously, it's a box on wheels in all of the right ways. You can also get it with a third row, but that will definitely take out some of your storage. The bigger advantage to the Tacoma is not the bed size, it's the peace of mind that your gross or heavy cargo is not damaging or stinking up your interior. The Taco also pulls more. So this will be able to tow around 6,500 pounds, depending on your configuration, of course, with the V6. And if you get the 4Runner, you are capped out at 5,000. That extra 1,500 makes a difference if you're planning on towing something like a car, because those trailers can weigh like 1,700 pounds on their own. I love that the interior of the Tacoma has a very clear premise, and it's not luxury, but it does still bring to the table a kind of fresh truck look. I mean, I still like the dashboard design, and this thing came out for the 2016 model year. I like the look and feel of the big HVAC controls. Your speedometer and tachometer are big and easy to read. The Limited will get, a faux leather on the dashboard and over here where your elbows rest. That'll look a little bit more premium than the rubberized stuff that you get here on the TRD Offroad. And it feels put together well, sturdy, durable, but the materials are very cheap. There's a lot of hard touch plastics in here for a vehicle that can cost, as equipped, $47,000. And the features that you get for that are just okay. Not as good as what you're gonna get with the high-end 4Runners though. So if you go with any of the TRD models, you're gonna have a wireless charger down here. Heated seats are also available, hold for the very base SR, but so long as you get the SR5, you will have a leather-wrapped steering wheel, and you're going to have an 8-inch infotainment system. So this is Toyota's previous setup, which is very simple, but also very slow. The resolution is borderline embarrassing in 2023, but you do have physical volume and tune dials. You also have the same 4.2-inch multifunction display here in the Tacoma that you will have in the 4Runner. Standard, you'll have 6 speakers in here that get the basics done okay. At least you have tweeters.
And there's an amplified JBL sound system with a sneaky subwoofer that provides more punch but still isn't too crisp.
But if you go with the manual transmission, you will not have JBL, and you will also not have push-button start and proxy key. Still, I think the Tacoma offers enough features for most people that are interested in these, but the seating position and comfort levels in here are kind of polarizing. For me, at 6'3", I definitely notice myself short on space, and it is a little awkward because in order to be comfortable, I kind of have to sit really far back, and the steering wheel doesn't come out super far, so I have to compromise where I'm sitting or just decide to have my hands out like this the whole time. And then the seat is also not too far away from the floor.
And the seat bottoms are short as well, making support inferior to the 4Runner.
And headroom will definitely be limited if you're over 6 feet and you have a sunroof. Thankfully, if you go with a V6 model, you're going to have lumbar adjustment, so I think that these seats will be tolerable for a lot of people. Comfortable is kind of a different story. Leather seats are an option on the TRD models, but standard on the Limited and TRD Pro. When it comes to storage, plenty of bottle holders to be found and storage compartments. But one issue with having seats low to the ground is that in order to be comfortable, you kind of have to stretch out more, which really shafts the people behind you. If I'm in a comfortable yet not excessive position, I still have to hug the front seat with my knees, and headroom is quite limited. You also not have any sort of console vents, but still acceptable storage, especially if you're not using the rear seats, because it folds in a manner that is quite handy. If you have to use this as a family vehicle, I think it will work. I'm sure you could fit child seats back there, just not super big ones or like reverse facing ones. At that point, you're better off with a 4Runner. Here in the 4Runner, both people in the front and the rear can be sitting in comfort, as you have plenty of room. Compared to some other two-row SUVs, you're not going to have the same levels of support. The seat is also pretty flat, but it is plush. The middle seat is fairly wide, and you have rear vents and USB ports.
Up front, the 4Runner is going to be more accommodating. While headroom is still limited, my knees have plenty of space, and the position is far less awkward.
The seats are a little higher off the ground. The cushions themselves are more supportive and plush. You also have standard lumbar adjustment, soft text on everything except for the base SR5, and most will even be heated. The feel of everything, the details are just better. Softer elbow rest, soft touch materials where your upward knee is going to rest, and it still comes with the same durable build quality.
The TRD Pro and Offroad also take the truck yeah factor even further with a mechanical 4-wheel drive shift lever.
It also comes with similar features trim by trim, but it does have some advantages, like a heated steering wheel is available, and it actually comes on a lot of different trims. You will also get ventilated front seats with the Limited trim, and you'll have 8 speakers standard, which honestly I think are on par with the JBL sound system in the Tacoma. And then there's the 15-speaker JBL setup here. It has a lot more bass. I think it's more clear. Not a luxury car system, but a big step up from the Tacoma. If you're thinking you'll get better tech though, no, it's the same. In fact, they actually updated this here recently. It used to be a lot worse.
But it's straightforward, and it has Apple CarPlay and Android Auto, though that is wired only.
The gauge cluster here is also simple like the Tacomas, but I think the gauges themselves look more fun and rugged, and you also have Better storage on the interior as well. Larger pockets in the doors, little ones kind of riddled throughout here, and the ability to fit larger bottles in here if you remove these little center cups.
Overall, I think the Tacoma's cabin blends a modern look and old school truck qualities well, but the 4Runner trades fresh lines for a more upscale experience.
I think you'll end up feeling like you're getting more what you pay for here with the 4Runner, but obviously the practicality aspect of a truck is going to carry a price premium of itself. So remember that before you slander the Taco. While both of these are body-on-frame Toyotas with naturally aspirated V6s, they are different at basically every other corner. Under the hood of the Tacoma, you will find a more modern 3.5-liter V6, making 278 horsepower, and it has both direct and port fuel injection. This thing likes to rev a little bit more than the 4Runner, and it's paired up with a 6-speed automatic that can be a little hesitant to downshift. Sometimes gear hunts, whenever this generation first came out, that was a much bigger problem. But I found if you put it into ECT power, the thing wakes up. Now, what I would advise you go with, if you can drive it, is the 6-speed manual transmission. It's not the greatest stick shift in the world, kind of rubbery shifter, but it adds to the truck's personality instead of detracts from it overall. Pulling up this long hill, you really gotta prompt the thing to get it to downshift. Once it gets to where it needs to be, it does pull okay.
But what do the numbers say?
Had to be a little bit more gentle on the start there. By no means would I ever consider this fast, and some may find it even pokey, but I used to own the 2.7-liter 4-cylinder, which they still offer here. Now that was slow. This is just something that could use a little more torque to make it feel relaxed when under a higher load. Pulling up to highway speeds, about half throttle, we're perfectly fine. I'm not at a high elevation or anything. At 65 miles per hour, there's some tire noise, there's some wind noise, but it's still very easy to hold a conversation in here. Throwing the Tacoma through corners, it does have slow steering. It's numb.
Though it's not overboosted like you may expect. It's weighted appropriately and relatively direct.
It's not, super composed as we're going through the dips and dives of this road. While it is kind of vague on center, the truck doesn't really wander,
helping it achieve a very manageable on-road demeanor.
And even though, body roll is definitely present, if anything, it may be a little bit less than what I've found with the 4Runner, and it even has less brake dive from what I've experienced. Maybe that has something to do with it weighing a few hundred pounds lighter than the 4Runner and having a longer wheelbase, no matter which bed you go with. The Tacoma has a few components that make it more basic than the 4Runner. One, this comes with rear drum brakes, which do last a really long time and require very little maintenance until they need all of the maintenance, but they are just inferior. You kind of have a more spongy brake pedal as a result, but it stops the truck just fine. But this also comes with rear leaf springs. Over here on this really bad road, the Tacoma does have a lot of body cab dissonance. You feel the front and then the rear kind of doing their own thing. Feel it through the seat. It kind of hops around a little bit. Not the most settled feeling there. It doesn't really crash through the cabin. Like, you can go over these really just terrible roads.
And it prevents any sharp impacts from being translated to your spine.
There's just a lot going on. In other words, it's a kind of bouncy truck, just like what you would anticipate from a truck roughly 10 years ago. Now, the TRD Offroad does come with a slightly softer over small imperfections Bilstein suspension. Go with the TRD Sport and it flips that. It's going to be more firm over lighter imperfections. Whereas the standard suspension rides a middle ground. And then you have the TRD Pro, which gets its own Fox Racing shocks. I have not driven that. I would assume it to be softer, but I am going to review a TRD Pro Tacoma here soon. As far as visibility goes, both of these are pretty good. I think the 4Runner has a bigger windshield, but obviously there's less cabin around you. This is also pretty easy to see out of. They're very approachable for their size. And when it comes to off-road ability, these are both excellent. So I've already talked about the suspension, and a lot of this is going to carry over to the 4Runner, but not all of it. So here in the Tacoma, we're going to have a locking rear differential on the TRD Offroad and TRD Pro. With those models, you will also have A-Track, which allows the thing to almost simulate a locking front and locking rear differential through using the brakes to distribute power side to side. And it's an impressive system.
A-Track only applies to the manual transmission variants.
Go with the automatic models, and instead you will get crawl control, which does a similar thing but in a different way and gives you like an off-road cruise control.
And that system can actually dig you out of ruts too. It's not just a gimmick. The autos also get different off-road modes that can tweak engine power and traction control to better fit the situation. While the Tacoma is capable, the 4Runner's much shorter wheelbase and better angles make it superior for off-roading. Though if your goal is to overland, then the Tacoma's more versatile bed will allow for more storage and sleeping solutions while still retaining high capability. So I may lean Taco for that purpose, but my advice here is limited, as the only rig that I've cross-country camped in was a 90s Mustang.
Now, the usual knock against the 4Runner is that it's just too old school to compete against a lot of its unibody competition. But compared to the Tacoma, this is quite the luxury cruiser. And when it comes to its off-pavement equipment, you're going to have A-Track standard with all of the four-wheel drive models. Just like the Taco, crawl control and a rear locker comes standard on the off-road trims.
But this is unique in the Toyota lineup, as it offers KDSS on the TRD Offroad trims. While it is hard to find, it is a reliable way to not disconnect, but unlock the sway bars, allowing for more wheel articulation and debatably better on-road performance. It works automatically, it works well, and it was on the Land Cruiser, so you know it's reliable. The limited trim also has a special trick.
This is actually the only Toyota in North America to offer a selectable full-time four-wheel drive system. So you can keep it in 2 high, but if you put it in four-wheel drive, it uses a Torsen limited slip differential, giving you essentially all-wheel drive.
So you can use four-wheel drive in more scenarios without worry of drivetrain damage like you would get with the regular part-time four-wheel drive system.
But you can still lock the center diff, and you do have a low range as well. The Limited also has another party piece that I'll talk about here soon. But let's get into this powertrain. Come on. A 5-speed automatic is the real limiting factor here, as the 4-liter V6 is a very proven, somewhat torquey engine. It still does need to be revved out a little bit to actually get you moving, but it feels a little less dead at the low RPMs than the Tacoma. But just having 5 gears to choose from really makes the thing not want to downshift unless you plant the throttle, and yeah, even then it doesn't exactly hustle. You know, you're weighing in at around 4,700 pounds in some cases.
So 270 horsepower is not going to make this quick, but despite that, the numbers claim these two are similar in acceleration.
Man, that gearing is just so tall, which you would expect for a 5-speed. Despite that, we got to 60 in a very respectable 7.5 seconds, which I'm glad, because last year at a 4,000 foot density altitude, I got 8.8.
My inner accelerometer tells me the Tacoma feels more reactive with a slight perceivable advantage in passing power.
Going up hills and whatnot, so long as it's in the right gear, it moves just fine. There are aftermarket solutions that try to help the transmission get the most out of the engine, and it is at the very least smooth. One thing that I like about the 4Runner is that you have a sequential mode. This is also there on the Tacoma as well with the 6-speed automatic. So basically, you select the highest gear that this is willing to go into. If you're towing and you just want it to shift like normal up into 4th, you can tell it to do so. And once you're at 65 miles per hour, you're also welcomed by decent amount of tire noise, decent amount of wind noise. To my ears, I can't say which one is quieter.
Regardless, all of these are inefficient by today's standards, especially the 4Runner.
But you're not buying one of these to get the best gas mileage. You're buying one to keep it on the road as long as possible. And that it does pretty well. Throwing the TRD Offroad 4Runner, it's not the Pro that I was using earlier, on bad roads, you're gonna find this to be very forgiving. It's very soft and comes with basically none of that dissonance that I was finding with the Tacoma. In fact, this rides a hell of a lot better than the new Sequoia on the same sorts of abused roads. It still takes all of the impacts in stride, it's just more smooth and refined while doing so. Now, it does still kind of toss you about. You are reminded that this is a truck.
This sort of springy characteristic may make it feel tough on bad roads, but the body control is subpar, as you would anticipate.
You're also met with pretty slow steering. Feels very similar to what the Tacoma does. It's still easy to manage. I think it's well weighted, and the steering wheel in both of these is just really large, so it makes you feel like you're a Japanese pirate. Still have a decent amount of body roll, a little bit more brake dive, but if you want to tidy things up, you can get the X-Riaz suspension and the new TRD Sport and the Limited trim. So that actually diagonally links the shocks, and it does actually improve the handling characteristics of the 4Runner, and it doesn't sacrifice really any of the comfort too, which sounds great, but it's also notorious for only lasting like 50 or 60,000 miles, so a lot of people just end up replacing it with the TRD Offroad or just the standard suspension. I'm not going to go into the detail like I do on the individual reviews of these cars, but outside of the X-Riaz suspension and some minor issues over the years, it's been a very solid truck. The Tacoma, honestly, the 3.5 liter V6 catches a lot of flack, and I don't really think it deserves that because it's also been a very trustworthy truck. Yes, it's had some common issues, but so did this engine when it was first released. And it also does make some more valve noise than the 4 liter. It's just not as silky, but I have seen videos where people have pushed them past 300,000 miles already, and they've held up pretty well. I am still very wary on Tacoma frames, but that supposedly should be fixed post 2017, I believe. I think that's the last year of the big frame recall.
So the Japanese-built 4Runner is going to earn my trust award between these two, but they're both highly dependable. Safety-wise, the Tacoma earns a slight win by the crash test ratings, though neither are impressive. For both, you have adaptive cruise control, autonomous braking, and lane departure warning as standard, no lane centering. With the 4Runner, all have blind spot monitoring.
And it's something that's optional or standard on the SR5 and up Tacomas. After driving both of these, my opinion has definitely been swayed.
The advantages the 4Runner holds in passenger comfort, space, quality, and road manners are more noticeable than I thought. This, in combination with practicality that, when not using the second row, could rival a long bed Tacoma in some usages, and the 4Runner is making a compelling argument. I adore the Tacoma too. Yes, the ride is more truckish and less composed, but it's not to an abusive degree. I also appreciate its versatility, its style inside and out.
And also, I really love having a manual transmission, especially in a more modestly powered truck. But for a lot of other folks, I think this is just easier to love. So that's why this wins today's comparison. This is the vehicle I would recommend to more people looking for an active lifestyle vehicle that will last them forever. Though if your needs require extra towing capacity, you highly desire 3 pedals like myself,
your budget can't be stretched,
or having a durable composite bed is a must, the Tacoma is still a great option and something I'd personally love to own someday.
And with new generations of each of these just over the horizon, I think we will likely lose some of the grit, that bulletproof factor that keeps people like myself so attached to these trucks. Hopefully the new models can prove themselves too, but time will have to tell.
Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed the video, then please leave a like to help me take on the YouTube algorithm. If you want to see more, subscribe and hit the bell. And follow me on Patreon for an additional podcast. I'll catch you in the next one.